After I caught my girlfriend cheating on me, her dad told me, "Why didn't you cheat on her first? Why would you say that about your own daughter?" I was sitting in Thomas's living room explaining to him why I was breaking up with Amelie. I showed him the screenshots of his daughter talking to another guy, but he clearly knew something that I didn't. I promise you, when you find out what she actually did to you, you'll wish you cheated on her sooner. This is 10 times worse. He put my phone down, stood up, and grabbed his car keys. He was a big guy who worked construction and still looked intimidating at 55. I'd always been slightly scared of him during the 2 years Amelie and I dated, but he was a good guy to me. The drive to Amelie's apartment was silent except for Thomas's heavy breathing. His knuckles were whiter than Michael Jackson on the steering wheel. I'd never seen him this angry, and it wasn't even directed at me. I'd hate to see him blue-balled. Whatever he knew about his daughter was eating him alive. We knocked on her apartment door and waited. I heard male voices inside, which made my stomach turn. The door opened, but it wasn't Amelie. Some shirtless guy I'd never seen before stood there looking confused. Thomas didn't hesitate. He shoulder-checked the door so hard and slammed it against the wall. Inside was worse than I imagined. 3 more guys were chilling on the couch eating cherries in their underwear. A 64-pack of rubbers sat on the coffee table like some twisted centerpiece. Empty beer bottles covered every surface. "Where is she?" Thomas's voice boomed through the apartment. The guys scrambled to grab their clothes. One tried to explain they were just hanging out, but Thomas wasn't buying it. He marched down the hallway toward Amelie's bedroom while I stood frozen by the door. This was so much worse than just cheating. This was something else entirely. Thomas tried the bedroom door, but it was locked. He knocked hard enough to shake the frame. We could hear movement inside and Amelie's voice telling someone to be quiet. Without warning, Thomas stepped back and kicked the door. The cheap wood splintered and the door flew open. Amelie was sitting on her bed with ring lights and a phone tripod set up. She was wearing lingerie I'd bought her for Valentine's Day. Her laptop showed some social media page I didn't recognize. When she saw us, her face went from surprised to guilty to defiant in about 2 seconds. "Tell him what you did," Thomas pointed at me while staring down his daughter. She pulled a robe around herself and wouldn't meet my eyes. The other guys left because even they knew what was about to go down. Amelie kept fidgeting with her phone like she wanted to delete something. "I'm trying to make content online." She said it like that explained everything. "Tell him why now." Thomas's voice was deadly calm now, which was somehow scarier. Amelie finally looked at me. Her eyes were watery, but I couldn't tell if it was real emotion or just another performance. She'd gotten good at faking things like her organisms, good enough to fool me for 2 years. "I'm pregnant." She let that bomb drop and waited for my reaction. My mind went blank. Thomas said, "Don't get worked up yet. Tell him whose it is." Thomas wasn't letting her off easy. Amelie's face crumpled. She started ugly crying, which used to make me want to comfort her. Now it just made me feel sick. She grabbed tissues from her nightstand and tried to compose herself. "It's your brother's." She whispered it so quietly I almost didn't hear. "Nick and I, it just happened. You were always at work and he was there and we just wanted to quickly slip it in." The words hit me like a punch to the gut and everything went fuzzy around the edges. My legs felt like they weren't attached to my body anymore and I had to grab the doorframe to stay upright. The room started spinning and I could see myself standing there like I was watching from the ceiling. Some poor idiot who just found out his whole life was a lie. Thomas's big hand landed on my shoulder and he started steering me toward the door, his grip keeping me from falling over. My feet moved on their own while my brain kept repeating those words over and over. Nick and Amelie, my brother and my girlfriend. The shirtless guy was still in the hallway pulling on his shirt, and he opened his mouth to ask something, but Thomas just looked at him and growled something that made him scramble for the front door. We walked past the living room where the other guys were grabbing their stuff and rushing out, nobody wanting to stick around for whatever was about to happen. Thomas kept his hand on my shoulder all the way to his truck and basically pushed me into the passenger seat. The ride back to his place was dead quiet except for his heavy breathing and him hitting the steering wheel every few minutes. He started to say something about Amelie's past, about things he should have told me, but his words sounded like they were coming through water and I couldn't focus on them. The streetlights blurred past the window and I pulled out my phone without thinking. My fingers typed 3 words to Nick. "Call me now." The message showed read right away, but no dots appeared. No typing. Nothing. Of course, he was too scared to face me. Thomas pulled into his driveway and led me inside to his couch while he went to make coffee. I opened Amelie's Instagram on my phone and looked at it with fresh eyes. There were links I'd never clicked before in her bio. Something called OnlyFans, and another site I didn't recognize. The comments under her photos suddenly made sense. All these guys calling her baby and saying weird stuff I'd always thought was just random internet creeps. Thomas came back with 2 mugs and sat in his recliner watching me scroll. There were tip menus on some site, prices for different types of content, subscription tiers. How had I been so blind? Thomas didn't say anything. Just let me process it all while the coffee got cold in my hands. That night I lay on his couch staring at the ceiling while my brain wouldn't shut off. Every time Nick came over late at night to hang out. Every time Amelie said she was too tired when I got home from work. All those times they were probably laughing at me behind my back. The image of those condoms on her coffee table kept flashing in my head along with the ring lights and camera setup. My phone started buzzing around 6 in the morning with texts from people I knew. Word was already spreading somehow. People asking if it was true, if Amelie and I broke up, if the rumors were real. I didn't open any of them because I didn't even know what rumors were out there, and I wasn't ready to deal with any of it. Around noon, Thomas called even though I was still on his couch. He was outside working on his truck and said he wanted to check on me. His voice sounded tired and old when he apologized for everything and asked me not to do anything stupid about Nick yet. He said we both needed time to think before anyone did something they'd regret. I promised him I'd stay calm even though calm was the last thing I felt. After the call, I opened a new text to Amelie and started typing every angry thought in my head. I called her names I'd never said out loud, told her exactly what I thought of her, but then I stared at the wall of text and deleted every word. She'd just use it against me somehow, play victim like she always did when she messed up. Instead, I blocked her number and her Instagram and everything else I could find. Late that night, my phone rang and Nick's name popped up. I almost didn't answer, but my thumb hit accept before my brain could stop it. The first words out of his mouth were, "It's not what you think," before I even said hello. I asked him how getting my girlfriend pregnant could possibly not be what I think, and the line went quiet for a second before the call ended. He hung up on me like the coward he'd always been when things got hard. I threw my phone on Thomas's couch and grabbed a pen and paper from his kitchen drawer. My hands were shaking, but I needed to do something, anything, to feel less like I was drowning. I started writing down everything I had to handle now that my life was blown to pieces. Get tested for STIs was #1 on the list because who knows how many guys Amelie had been with. Get my stuff from her place went next. Then cancel the Netflix we shared, change my passwords, all the boring stuff you don't think about until your world falls apart. Having tasks to focus on helped me breathe a little easier, even though my chest still felt tight. I picked up my phone and called my boss at the construction site. He answered on the second ring, and I told him I needed a personal day, maybe 2, for a family emergency. He didn't ask any questions, just said to take care of myself and not worry about the Peterson job. I was grateful he didn't push for details because I couldn't explain this mess to anyone yet. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, saying Amelie had already made all her social media private and was doing damage control. He warned me she might try to spin this her way, and I should document everything I saw at her place. I opened her Instagram on my laptop and started taking screenshots of everything before she could delete it all. Her subscription site link was still in her bio, and I clicked it even though my stomach turned. There were preview images I'd never seen before, prices for different types of content, tip menus for special requests. I screenshotted everything, including our bank statements that showed I'd paid for the camera equipment she was using for this. Each image felt like finding out about another lie, but I needed evidence of what she'd been doing behind my back. My phone lit up with a message from my buddy from high school who'd heard something was going down. He sent me a video clip someone had saved before Amelie locked everything down. I recognized my own hoodie hanging on her bedroom door in the background. The timestamp showed it was filmed 3 weeks ago while I was pulling a double shift at work. I saved the video to my cloud storage and added it to my growing folder of evidence. The next morning, I drove to the walk-in clinic downtown and told the receptionist I needed a full STI panel. She handed me forms to fill out, and I sat in the waiting room surrounded by other people dealing with their own problems. When the nurse called me back, she was kind, but professional as I explained I didn't know how many partners my ex had been with. She nodded like she'd heard this story before and started preparing the tests. The whole thing felt like accepting this horrible new reality where I couldn't even trust what had happened to my own body. Thomas called while I was waiting for my test results, and his voice sounded heavy. He admitted he'd suspected Amelie was doing stuff online for money, but thought it was just photos, not this whole operation. His voice cracked when he said he should have warned me sooner, but he didn't know how to bring it up. I told him it wasn't his fault, even though part of me wished someone had told me the truth months ago. My mom started calling and texting, saying she wanted the family to sit down together and talk this through. I texted back that I wasn't ready to be in the same room as Nick, and she needed to respect that boundary. She kept pushing, saying we were brothers and needed to work this out, but she didn't understand what they'd done to me yet. The nurse came back to draw my blood and asked gentle questions about my last exposure dates. I had to admit I didn't even know when Amelie was last faithful to me, if she ever was at all. She marked down that my last confirmed exposure was unknown and drew several vials of blood for the different tests. The whole process made me feel dirty, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. That afternoon, my email pinged with a message from Amelie since I'd blocked her phone number. She was asking to meet for closure and to discuss the pregnancy situation. She said we needed to talk about what happens next and figure out how to handle things. I stared at the email for 10 minutes before typing back that I'd consider meeting after I got my test results. I needed to protect myself first before dealing with whatever mess she and Nick had created. Thomas texted again saying Amelie was already telling people I'd been neglecting her, and that's why she turned to Nick. The story was spreading through our friend group, and everyone was picking sides without knowing the truth. I screenshotted her email and his texts, adding them to my evidence folder because I had a feeling I'd need proof of everything soon. My boss called to check on me and said HR had heard there might be some personal drama affecting me. I kept it vague but professional, just saying I was dealing with a family situation that would be resolved soon. He assured me my job was safe as long as I communicated about any time I needed off. At least one thing in my life was still stable, even if everything else was falling apart around me. 3 days later, I waited outside Amelie's building until I saw her car pull out of the parking lot heading to work. I had my old key and a couple boxes in my truck for getting my stuff out of there. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual, and my hands were shaking a little as I unlocked her door. Inside, the apartment smelled different, like cheap cologne and stale beer instead of the vanilla candles she used to burn. One of the guys from that night was sitting on the couch in his boxers eating cereal and watching TV. He jumped up when he saw me and started apologizing right away, saying he had no idea Amelie had a boyfriend. He grabbed a shirt from the floor and kept saying sorry over and over while I just walked past him to get my Xbox from the entertainment center. I packed my games, my grandmother's picture from the wall, and the coffee maker I'd bought when I basically lived here half the week. The guy followed me around, still apologizing and explaining that Amelie told them she was single and just making content for money. I grabbed my clothes from the bedroom dresser, trying not to look at the bed where everything happened. The ring lights were still set up, and there were new outfits I'd never seen hanging in the closet. I took only what was mine, leaving the gifts I'd given her because I didn't want any reminders. Back at work the next morning, my boss pulled me aside before the crew meeting and asked me to step into his office. He closed the door and told me HR had heard there might be some personal drama affecting me. I kept it simple, just said I was dealing with a family situation that got complicated but wouldn't affect my work. He nodded and assured me my job was safe as long as I communicated if I needed any time off for appointments or whatever. He even offered to adjust my schedule if needed, which was more understanding than I expected from a construction company. That afternoon, Thomas called while I was on lunch break and told me he'd met with Nick at a diner to talk things through. He said my brother looked like shit, hadn't been sleeping, and was scared out of his mind about becoming a father. Nick apparently broke down crying in the middle of the restaurant when Thomas asked him how he planned to support a baby. I felt a quick flash of pity for him before remembering this was all his own fault for sleeping with my girlfriend. Thomas said Nick kept asking if I'd ever forgive him, but Thomas told him that wasn't his call to make. When I got home, I sat at my laptop and started blocking Amelie on everything I could think of. Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, even LinkedIn, where we'd connected when she was pretending to look for real jobs. Each block felt like cutting another tie to the life I thought we were building together. I left one email address open for any necessary communication about getting the rest of my stuff or legal things. Setting that boundary made me feel like I was taking back at least a tiny piece of control in this mess. My phone buzzed with a message from a buddy who worked at the same company as one of Amelie's friends. He forwarded me screenshots from a group chat from months ago where Amelie was bragging about having me as her safe option. She literally wrote that she had me for stability and paying bills while keeping her fun options open on the side. There were laughing emojis from her friends and comments about how smart she was to lock down a construction guy with steady income. Reading those messages made me run to the bathroom and throw up my lunch. The next day, I met with Destiny Schaefer at her law office downtown that Thomas had recommended. She was professional but kind as she explained I had no legal obligations to Amelie or the baby since we weren't married. She helped me understand my options if Amelie tried to come after me for money or claimed I'd promised support. We went through different scenarios and she gave me documents to protect myself financially going forward. She also advised me to document everything, including the screenshots and any communication with Amelie or Nick. That evening, Nick texted asking if we could talk, and I almost deleted it, but decided to answer the phone when he called 5 minutes later. His voice was shaky as he admitted they'd hooked up twice while I was pulling overtime shifts to save money for the vacation I'd planned for Amelie's birthday. He kept saying it just happened and he never meant to hurt me, but I cut him off and asked how accidentally sleeping with my girlfriend twice worked exactly. He started crying and begged me not to tell Mom yet because he wasn't ready to face her disappointment. I hung up without promising anything because I wasn't going to protect him from consequences anymore. I spent the rest of the night going through credit card statements on my laptop and finding charges I hadn't noticed before. There were purchases for streaming equipment, fancy lingerie from stores I'd never heard of, and monthly subscriptions to the platform she used for her content. I disputed every charge I could prove was for her side business and canceled the credit card we'd shared for household expenses. Each dispute felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity, even though the money was already gone. My first therapy appointment was the next Thursday, and I sat in the waiting room filling out forms about my mental health history. The therapist was an older woman who listened without judgment as I explained what happened with Amelie and Nick. She helped me put names to what I was feeling like betrayal trauma, family destruction, and sexual deception from not knowing who Amelie really was. We talked about the intrusive thoughts that kept me awake at night and the anger that would hit me randomly during the day. She gave me breathing exercises and grounding techniques to use when I felt overwhelmed by everything. At work on Monday, my boss called me into his office again and told me he was reassigning me to the Riverside project site. He explained it was the same pay and hours, but at a location where Nick's company never had business. It stung my pride a little to need special accommodations, but I was also relieved I wouldn't risk running into my brother at a job site. 3 days later, I was standing in line at the pharmacy waiting to pick up the anxiety meds my therapist prescribed when I saw Amelie walk through the automatic doors. She froze when she spotted me holding my prescription slip. We locked eyes for maybe 2 seconds before she turned around and walked right back out, leaving a basket of shampoo and vitamins on the counter. The pharmacist called my name and I grabbed my pills, my hands shaking as I signed the paperwork. That night, I sat at my computer and typed out an email to Amelie that took me 3 hours to write. I kept it simple and formal, stating our relationship was over. I wanted no financial ties and any communication should go through lawyers if needed. I hit send and felt like I was finally drawing a line in the sand after weeks of chaos. Thomas called the next morning asking if I'd attend a mediated discussion with Amelie about the pregnancy situation. I told him I'd think about it, but if I agreed, it would be in a public place, 1 hour maximum and no recording devices allowed. He said those terms were fair, and he'd set it up for Saturday at a coffee shop downtown. Saturday came too fast, and I walked into the coffee shop 10 minutes early to pick a table near the exit. Amelie showed up 5 minutes late wearing sunglasses inside like some kind of celebrity hiding from paparazzi. She sat down and immediately started talking about how she used my stability and income to fund her online career while sleeping with Nick when she felt neglected. She said it matter-of-factly, like I should understand her logic. I asked if she was getting prenatal care and whether Nick was prepared to support the baby financially. She laughed and said Nick had been avoiding her calls about money and was already backing away from any responsibility. The whole conversation lasted 40 minutes before I stood up and left without saying goodbye. Back in my car, I sent Nick a text saying I'd support him getting a paternity test, but wouldn't be involved beyond that basic advice. He needed to handle his mess without dragging me into it anymore. My next therapy appointment focused on communication techniques to avoid getting pulled into arguments or defending myself constantly. The therapist gave me actual scripts to follow when people tried to guilt me or make me explain my boundaries. Having those phrases ready made me feel less reactive and more in control of conversations. Nick texted me 2 days later saying he was looking into payment plans for the paternity test and prenatal costs. His messages were full of panic about money and kept repeating that he never meant for this to happen. I didn't respond because intentions didn't change the reality of what he did. That weekend, my mom showed up at my apartment door with Nick standing behind her looking like a kicked puppy. She started talking about family needing to stick together, but I didn't open the door past the chain lock. I told her she needed to respect my boundaries, even if it hurt her to see her sons divided like this. Nick tried to say something, but I closed the door and turned up my TV until they left. Monday morning, I met with Destiny at her office, and she explained how to document any harassment that might happen. She helped me set up a filtered email system that would automatically sort messages from Amelie or Nick into a separate folder I could review with a clear head. She also gave me templates for cease and desist letters if things escalated. Being prepared for potential problems made me feel less vulnerable to whatever drama might come next. The whole system took about an hour to set up on my laptop and phone. 2 days later, I was back at the construction site pushing through the Henderson warehouse project that had been sitting on my desk for weeks. My hands moved on autopilot measuring beams and checking load calculations while my brain tried not to think about everything else. The numbers made sense in a way that nothing else did right now. I stayed late rechecking every measurement twice because at least blueprints didn't lie to your face for 2 years. When I finally submitted the completed plans, my supervisor walked over and looked through them right there at my desk. He nodded and said I'd done solid work considering everything going on, then walked away before I could ask what he meant by that. The next afternoon, Thomas texted asking if I wanted to grab a beer after work. We met at this dive bar near the highway where nobody from our neighborhood would see us. He ordered 2 beers and stared at his bottle for a long time before telling me about his ex-wife. 20 years ago, he'd cheated with some woman from his gym, and it destroyed his marriage completely. His wife took everything in the divorce and moved 3 states away with their son, who still won't talk to him. He said watching Amelie do this to me made him sick because he knew exactly what kind of damage cheating causes. He'd spent years trying to raise Amelie right after her mom left, but somewhere along the way, she'd turned into someone he didn't recognize. His hands shook a little when he talked about finding out she was doing online stuff for money. That night, I got an email from Amelie with Nick copied on it saying she'd scheduled a paternity test for Thursday at the medical center downtown. The message was all business with appointment times and what Nick needed to bring for identification. She'd clearly gotten a lawyer involved because it read like a legal document with none of her usual rambling texts. I forwarded it to Destiny, who confirmed it looked standard, and I should stay away from the whole thing. Thursday morning, I signed up for overtime at the warehouse project instead of sitting home thinking about what was happening across town. I hauled materials and operated the forklift until my back hurt, and my mind went blank from exhaustion. Every time I thought about Nick sitting in that waiting room, I'd grab another load of concrete blocks to move. My supervisor asked if I was trying to finish the whole project myself, and I just shrugged and kept working. That weekend, I pulled out the box of stuff Amelie had given me over 2 years. Concert tickets from our first date, a watch for my birthday, hoodies she'd bought me, picture frames with our photos still in them. I drove everything to the donation center and watched the volunteer load it all into bins for sorting. Each item that left my car felt like cutting away dead weight I'd been carrying. The therapist had homework for me about planning for family events where I'd see Nick. We made a list of every holiday and birthday coming up and figured out exit strategies for each one. If he showed up at Mom's for Thanksgiving, I'd leave after an hour. Christmas, I'd visit Mom the day before when he wouldn't be there. My nephew's birthday party, I'd skip completely and send a gift instead. Having it all written down made the next year feel manageable instead of this huge, scary thing. Friday night, my phone buzzed with a text from Nick saying the lab needed a week for results, and he was scared about telling Mom. He kept typing and deleting messages because I could see the dots appearing and disappearing for like 10 minutes. I didn't write back, but the weight of this secret felt heavy, knowing Mom would find out soon. She'd already been asking why her boys weren't talking, and making up excuses was getting harder. Monday morning, HR called me into their office to check how I was doing. They said they'd heard I'd been working a lot of overtime and wanted to make sure I wasn't burning myself out. I told them I was fine and actually liked staying busy right now. They said to let them know if I needed anything and reminded me about the employee assistance program for counseling. Walking back to my desk, I felt grateful my company actually gave a damn, even if they didn't know all the details. That afternoon, Thomas sent me a photo of paint swatches spread out on a table with a text saying he was helping set up a nursery. He explained he'd told Amelie she could have his help with baby stuff, but only if she followed his rules about visits and didn't bring any of her online drama near the kid. The colors were all soft yellows and greens, and seeing him try to be a good grandfather despite everything made my chest tight. He was stepping up even though his daughter had disappointed him. My social media had been blowing up with people fishing for gossip ever since word got out about me and Amelie breaking up. Some mutual friends kept sending messages asking what really happened or if the rumors were true. I spent an hour unfriending anyone who seemed more interested in drama than actually caring about how I was doing. My friend list went from 300 people to maybe 50, but those 50 were the ones who'd checked on me without demanding details, the ones who just said they were there if I needed anything. My circle got way smaller, but it felt cleaner without all the fake concern and people treating my life like entertainment. Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with an email from Amelie with just FYI in the subject line. The attachment was a PDF from the lab showing the paternity test results in black and white. Nick's name sat there next to probability of paternity 99.9%, like some sick joke that wasn't funny anymore. I stared at those numbers for way too long, even though I already knew what they'd say. My hands shook a little as I forwarded it to my lawyer just to have it documented somewhere official. The proof made everything real in a way that hurt worse than finding out in the first place. I grabbed my keys and walked to my car without really thinking about where I was going. The parking lot at work was half empty since it was still early, but I just sat there with the engine off. Everything I'd been holding back for weeks came crashing down all at once. I pressed my palms against my eyes and let myself cry for real this time. Not just the angry tears from before. My chest hurt from trying to hold it in for so long, and once I started, I couldn't stop. After maybe 20 minutes, I finally caught my breath and wiped my face with some napkins from the glove box. I pulled out my phone and typed a text to my mom, saying the test confirmed what we suspected. I added that I needed space to process this and would call her when I was ready. She replied immediately with 3 heart emojis and, "I love you," which almost made me start crying again. Thursday afternoon, Thomas called saying Nick wanted to talk at the community center with a mediator present. I thought about it for a while before texting back my conditions. No excuses, no blame shifting, just facts and next steps. Thomas said Nick agreed to everything, and the meeting was set for Saturday at 2. I spent Friday night writing down what I wanted to say so I wouldn't get emotional and forget my main points. Saturday came too fast, and I drove to the community center feeling like I might throw up. The mediator was some older lady who looked like she'd seen this kind of mess before. Nick was already there looking smaller than I remembered, fidgeting with his phone and avoiding eye contact. The mediator started with ground rules, but Nick interrupted saying he needed to get something off his chest first. He admitted he'd been jealous of my relationship with Amelie from the start because I always had everything together. He said my work schedule gave him an excuse to hang around, and one thing led to another. Hearing him say it out loud didn't make me feel better, just tired and disappointed in who my brother turned out to be. I pulled out my list and read through my terms without looking at him. We'd stay low contact with no overlap at family events for at least a year. He couldn't ask me for money for the kid no matter how tight things got. If Mom wanted both of us somewhere, we'd coordinate so only one showed up at a time. Nick nodded along to everything, looking relieved that I was even giving him a path forward instead of cutting him off completely. The mediator helped us work out the details and put everything in writing even though it wasn't legally binding. Monday morning, my therapist noticed I seemed calmer and asked what changed over the weekend. I told her about the mediation, and she said having clear boundaries was a good step forward. She pulled up her laptop and helped me find a boxing gym near my apartment that had beginner classes. I signed up for 3 sessions a week, figuring punching something might help with the anger that still bubbled up sometimes. The first class kicked my ass, but in a good way that left me too tired to think about Nick or Amelie. Wednesday evening, Thomas texted asking if I wanted to grab a beer since he was in my neighborhood for a job. We met at this dive bar near the highway and sat at the bar not really talking at first. After his second beer, he said no matter what happened with his daughter and my brother, we were good. He'd been disappointed by someone he loved too, and understood what I was going through better than most people. We agreed to meet up every couple weeks just to check in and maybe watch a game or something. Having him as a friend felt weird but also right considering everything we'd been through together. That night, I pulled out a notebook I'd bought but never used and started writing what I wanted in my next relationship. I wrote down stuff like honesty, even when it's hard, loyalty when things get tough, and someone who actually shared my values about family. The list got longer than I expected and included things I didn't even know mattered to me before all this happened. When I finally put the pen down and got ready for bed, something felt different in a good way. I brushed my teeth and climbed into bed without checking my phone for messages or drama. For the first time in weeks, I fell asleep without replaying everything in my head and slept straight through until morning. Thanks for exploring all these questions with me today. It's been a pretty curious little journey to share together. Until next time, take care. Subscribe for more content like this.